Joining us now for more is the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Stéphane Dujarric. We thank you so much for your time tonight. Earlier today, the UN General Assembly convened just the 11th emergency meeting in its history. Let's take a listen to Ukraine's ambassador.
If Ukraine does not survive, international peace will not survive. If Ukraine does not survive, the United Nations will not survive. Have no illusions. If Ukraine does not survive, we cannot be surprised if democracy fails next.
Fiery rhetoric there. Does he have a point?
Well, this is clearly one of the most challenging times the United Nations has seen in decades. The charter is being tested. The charter is being violated. But the UN is a resilient organization. From the Secretary General's point of view, his clear message to the Russian leader has been to stop the fighting and pull back his troops. Meanwhile, we as an organization are focusing on the humanitarian aid we can bring to the millions of Ukrainians who so desperately need it.
And you said the humanitarian aid. Is that what you believe the role of the UN is in this conflict?
Well, you know, the thing is, there are different kinds of UN. There's the UN of the member states that we see in the Security Council, that we see in the General Assembly. While those member states try to find common ground to actually get a political settlement, to get peace, we are moving. We are staying and delivering in Ukraine. We have colleagues in the eastern part of the country, throughout Ukraine, working in very difficult conditions, trying to bring some help to those men, women, and children of Ukraine. And we've seen it from your reports. The devastation on the civilian population is catastrophic and heartbreaking.
As long as Russia, though, has veto power on the UN Security Council, can the UN even be effective?
Well, you know, there is a political statement, as in anywhere. We know what the situation is in the Security Council. We know in the General Assembly it's a different process. It's sending a message when a resolution will actually pass. But we, in terms of the Secretary General, has no control over what the member states do. So while they discuss, we keep calling, obviously, for increased dialogue. We're happy to see that Ukrainians and Russians met today, and we understand there'll be further meetings. But our focus has to be on what we as staff of the UN can actually do today.
And Stéphane, as you know, Vladimir Putin put his country's nuclear forces on high alert. Today, President Biden said that Americans should not be worried about a nuclear war. But how did we get to this point in 2022 where we're now talking about nuclear weapons? Clearly, the dangers of that go far beyond Ukraine's borders.
Well, first of all, I mean, the mere mention of nuclear conflict is inconceivable. There is no pretext or a reason to use nuclear weapons. I mean, how do we get there? If you want to take a step back, part of it has been the lack of progress in trying to eliminate nuclear arsenals, something that we have been pushing for a long time, but there's just been very little progress. And in fact, there's been a proliferation of nuclear technology throughout the world, which is which is worrying and should be worrying.
And let's talk about the humanitarian crisis that, of course, cannot be overlooked. The UN says that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are now on the move, and this war could cost upwards of $1 billion. Does Russia need to be held accountable for creating this crisis, and also the Ukrainian residents who have lost and will still lose their lives?
Well, it is clear that we need Russia to halt its military operations. What we're already seeing on the border of Ukraine and its western neighbors are hundreds of thousands of people leaving. It is critical that all of those European countries open their borders and give protection to people who are refugees, who are fleeing violence. And one thing I think we're concerned about, we're seeing some reports of discrimination, because obviously there are Ukrainians coming out, but as there are in a lot of countries, there are other people who live in Ukraine. And we want to make sure that those people who may be from the Middle East, who may be from Africa, who happen to be in Ukraine and are trying to flee, are afforded the same protection as Ukrainians as they seek shelter and safety in Western Europe.
And lastly, I'd like to get your reaction to the other crisis making headlines today, the climate crisis. The main headline from the new UN climate report out today is delay means death. What do our leaders need to do right now to reverse course?
Well, I think reverse course is exactly the right expression. What we want to see is emissions cut by 45% by 2030. We want to get to net zero by 2050. But the numbers that we're seeing now are in fact showing that emissions will rise. What we need to do is cut our addiction to coal, cut our addiction to fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are just bad for people, bad for planet. We need to change our energy supply. And we're seeing, even if you look at the Ukraine crisis, the fact that so many parts of the world are reliant on the gas that comes from Russia and through Ukraine to Europe instead of renewable energies is just making this crisis even worse.
Stéphane Dujarric, we thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.